listening to The Stall and Stable Show, ideas for happy horsekeeping.
Deciding what to feed our horses can be daunting. Some horse owners rely on their trainers for guidance, others rely on the barn manager, or even random tidbits from the internet. Thankfully, there are people and companies for whom equine nutrition is a specialty. In this first episode of our new Triple Crown Nutrition series, I'm joined by Stacey Anderson from Triple Crown to answer some key questions about how we can figure out what feed is best for our horses. It's a Q&A session that can help make those feed decisions a lot easier for everyone. So listen in. This is episode 133 of the Stall and Stable Show with Triple Crown Nutrition. Today's Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. I'm your host, Helena Harris. The Stall and Stable Show is made possible with the generous support of our sponsors. Please show them your support by learning more about what they do. Go to our website, stallandstable.com/support to find out more. Today's episode features an in-depth Q&A session with nutrition consultant at Triple Crown, Stacey Anderson. Stacey's the person who gets the majority of inbound inquiries from horse owners looking to better understand how feeds work and what's best for their horses. This means Stacey has fielded a lot of questions. We're lucky to have her here today to kick off the Triple Crown Nutrition series, where we'll discuss a wide range of topics relevant to what and how we feed our horses for optimal health. Hi, Stacey, and welcome to Stall and Stable.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me today.
I'm particularly excited because I thought I knew a thing or two about nutrition, and then I got my horses to South Carolina in a whole new environment and realized I know nothing. So the timing for this segment is perfect. I know we have a bunch of questions that are common in your line of work. We're going to talk about those. We're going to read the questions. We're going to answer them together, and then I might throw in a couple of my own.
Absolutely. I'm here to help.
Okay, I really am excited. I'm such a dork. But then again, so are you, because this is your whole career.
Totally. Yes.
How long have you been with Triple Crown?
I'm going on 12, 13 years now with Triple Crown. Yeah.
Okay, so you like your job?
Love my job. Absolutely. Yes.
That's rare these days.
Yeah, it is. I get to meet all kinds of horses through their owners every day. So it's just great. I've loved horses my entire life. I'm an animal lover. The only reason I'm not like a hoarder is because my husband keeps me in check. But yeah, so it's wonderful. I love talking about the horses and meeting the people and getting to know people really well and gaining friends through this over the years. It's
What do you do? Well, and we don't have to go into detail. This could be an episode all on its own. Generally, what is your job function at Triple Crown?
I am the voice behind the telephone. I am the fingers behind the keyboard. So if someone has a question, concern, or issue, and they call into the Triple Crown 800 number, generally they're going to get me, Stacey. Hi, everybody that I've spoke to in the past. Or if you send an email to the helpline on Triple Crown's website, those also generally come to me as well. So I have answered from the simplest of questions over the years to some really ring dingers that have been fun to get together with some additional PhDs and masters people and help me figure out how to best suit these horses. So day to day, we talk about everything from my horse is too chubby, my horse is too skinny, what type of hay to feed, what type of feed to feed, supplements and everything in between. And I hate to say it, but we talk about horse manure a lot. Like
I love it.
Times a day. Yes.
It's the only real way that they have to tell us that their gut is healthy and they're getting what they need.
Yes, we get to talk about that a lot around here. So
I can't believe you just said that. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's my new best friend. But it's true. It's like little babies that you really have very few indicators besides what's coming out, of what's going in, and what's coming out.
Absolutely.
Listeners, over time, Stacey's going to join me for this regular Triple Crown Nutrition segment. We're going to try to answer as many questions as possible, maybe debunk some myths, explain things that might be confusing. So in this segment, we're starting with some Q&A that come into Stacey's line pretty often. And hopefully we'll answer some questions that you might have out there listening. So let's start with, it's wintertime right now as we're recording this, and grazing in winter, no matter where you are, can be limited for many horses. We just relocated to South Carolina, where you think everything is warm and fuzzy. It might be fuzzy, but it's not always warm. So our pasture is actually dormant. Not a lot of nutrition there. So a lot of us have to supplement our horse's diet with hay, whether that's in part or in its entirety. What are the key factors for us to consider when choosing to feed hay?
I will say this starting off with horses in general, there is no like, this works all the time. So every horse is very individual. Every management situation is very individual. And so sometimes it's a lot about putting those pieces of the puzzle together. A huge piece of the puzzle for horses' nutrition, obviously, is their forage. That should really be the main component of their diet. So, the number one thing that I want folks to focus on is make sure that your horse is getting enough forage. So, whether that means pasture, hay pellets, hay cubes, complete feeds, if your horse is not able to chew forages very well, things like that. We're really looking for like the equivalent of a minimum of 1.5 to 2% of their body weight in forage intake per day. And when we say forages, it's all those things I mentioned: hay, pasture, feeds, that type of thing. I
Does
think
hay cubes
people,
count as forage if someone's feeding hay cubes?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Hay cubes count as forage. And, there's all different types of ways to feed hay cubes. There's a lot of farms that feed them dry, and there's a lot of people that have had a bad experience with feeding dry hay cubes. So, again, it's one of those things where it's up to each individual horse and management situation for figuring that out. Hay cubes can be a great addition if you're having trouble getting long stem hay in your area, which a lot of us are. I mean, the past couple of years, growing seasons throughout most of the US have been fairly poor, either too dry or too wet when it's time to harvest. So we've got minimal hay, and the hay that's out there might be more mature than we like, or, those types of things. So I would say the number one thing for forage in the wintertime is make sure you have enough. So you're going to want to look for forages that are low dust, low to no dust, really, ideally. No mold, no visible mold on the forages is something that you're going to look at. Depending on the type of horse you have, you might be wanting to look for something that has a little more leaf, that's a little younger, type, like was cut a little younger, because that's going to offer some more nutrients for your horses. Or if you have metabolic horses, you're trying to find that sweet spot where you don't want a whole lot of caloric nutrition from that hay, but you also don't want it to be so stemmy that you're causing potentially impaction colics and things like that. So it's definitely, you have to sometimes maybe not get the perfect thing, but get as close as you can for your horse, and then modify that through other things, right? Like using slow feed hay nets. Maybe you do feed some soaked cubes and some hay, because maybe the hay that you got is super stemmy and your horse is not doing great at working through it. All different things like that to help meet those forage requirements of your horse.
What is long-stemmed hay?
Traditionally, when we talk about long stem hay, we talk about a bale of hay, whether it be a 750-pound bale that you bring in with square or round, or even just a 2 or 3 string bale that's maybe 50 to 100 pounds. So that hay is only cut where the farmer cut it off for harvest. So those pieces of forage are generally, 3, 4 inches in length. And horses are very good at foraging through that, breaking it down, and are able to consume that. As horses age, or depending upon the forage that you have in your area, you may have to go to some alternatives. And generally, at Triple Crown, for most horses, we recommend long stem hay first, because they get the most foraging off of that. That's good for their brain, good for their gut. If you can't get enough of that, then a chopped forage is sort of the next best thing.
Okay.
Chopped forages are forages that have been not only cut in the field for harvest, but also brought into a facility and cut even shorter, generally around 1.5 to 2 inches in fiber length. These can be great options for horses that are older and maybe not having great teeth. It can be great options for horses that are really hard keepers, and you're just trying to get as many calories into them as easily as possible. So chopped hays can really help with putting some weight on for those hard keepers. So those would be sort of the next thing, the next level. It would be a chopped hay. Then next in preference would be a cube, because a cube is going to offer a little bit of fiber length, which, their hind gut, those gut microbia and bacteria need that fiber length in order to function to their optimal self. But then, we get to the point with some horses, because people are doing such a great job at like taking care of them, and they're really outliving their teeth. Like, and I tease some of my vet friends, if you could figure out how to put dental implants in teeth and make it in horses and make their teeth work after they've expired, We'll have horses living to 70 probably.
Yeah.
That could happen,
Yeah.
But yeah, so like after a cube, some horses even their teeth get so poor they just still struggle even with the cube length, which is like, half an inch long or shorter. So for those horses, we'll move on to shredded beet pulp or hay pellets and things like that. Not ideal for fiber length, but once you get a horse that's made it to that advanced stage, it's sort of like it's what it takes to keep them going.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So the long stem it's that's what we see in our typical square bales or round bales. Okay. And then the shorter the length is, it's really the more processed it is, the shorter the pieces are. Okay. Got it.
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
Okay. It's incredible that we can do an entire episode on hay. So we want to start with forage. Obviously, long stem is preferred, but based on our horse's individual needs, we have options going, from low processed to all the way to highly processed.
Yes.
How can we be sure that they're getting the right nutrition from their hay?
Wonderful question. So, number one, how is your horse's body condition? We generally recommend a slow transition into any new hay or any new feed source for a horse. So as you bring that new hay in, give your horses several days, 14 days to adjust. So mixing some of your old formula with the new hay that you've brought in. And then generally with horses, after about 2 weeks, you can kind of see how things are handling calorie wise for them. Are they maintaining, losing, or gaining? And sometimes if you are a person that is really hands-on with your horse and you see them multiple times a day, it's hard to notice those little changes. So I tell folks, feel free to take a picture once every other week or something like that so that you're not tricking yourself with those slight changes that happen. So number one, make sure that they're maintaining good body condition on the forages that you've provided. Then on top of that, obviously we know that many areas of the country are deficient in one or more vitamins and minerals, and especially hay, because that stuff starts, slowly degrading from the time the farmer cuts it. So horses on a forage-based diet, you still want to make sure they're getting proper vitamin and mineral. So if they need additional calories, a fortified feed is a great option. If they don't need additional calories, something like a ration balancer or a vitamin mineral supplement is a really great option. Ration balancers generally have a little bump in protein to help make up for any amino acid deficiencies that might be occurring in your forages. And then balancers, basically at just a pound or two a day for a 1,000-pound horse, will provide NRC recommended vitamin mineral support along with hays. And that is the case, at least when in the testing that I've done, in 99.9% of cases, if your horse is maintaining a good body condition off of your forage and you're feeding the appropriate amount of a Triple Crown ration balancer, if you do that, your horse will be meeting proper nutrition. And I'm sure that's the case with most companies, ration balancers. They're trying to make sure that it's going to meet those requirements.
The word ration balancer doesn't really make sense to me. Everybody kind of knows what it is. What's in it exactly?
Ration balancer is highly fortified with vitamins, minerals that your forages may be deficient in. So selenium, zinc, manganese, copper, a little calcium. Again, some additional amino acids, building blocks of protein that your forage might be lacking. But it's really highly fortified. So just 1 pound of that provides the same level of nutrients as, say, 6 pounds of one of the other higher calorie feeds.
So then is it compressed into a pellet, and what's the carrier?
Depends. The carrier is generally whatever the protein source is, right? So in terms of Triple Crown products, our 30% ration balancer, we use soy as the protein. And with our balancer gold, we use alfalfa meal and whey protein as the protein source.
I just feel like I opened the door to some secret room. There's always a little bit of a mystery. This is so cool. Yep. I feed my horse Brody the 30%, and he just does so well on it. It's a good product. This is great. So we got the ration balancer, highly fortified, and fortified means you throw in all of the vitamins and minerals that a horse may need. And in particular, the ration balancers are not high in calorie.
Correct. Yes. So when we talk about horse nutrition, we have to remember that horses that are about 1,000 pounds, they're probably eating 20 pounds of hay a day. So that right there, that's about almost 20,000 calories a day just in hay. And so when we talk about something like I'll have customers call and say, how many calories are in your ration balance? Or my horse cannot afford to gain any more weight. And I'll say, oh, it's about 1,200 calories. And they're like, oh my goodness. But you're thinking of calories in terms of like a 150-pound human,
Right.
not in terms of 1,000-pound horse. So a ration balancer for most horses is about what you or I would take in with like 100-calorie snack. So it's not a huge
Yes.
deal there. Yeah.
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 Those 100-calorie snacks are never satisfying. Just saying.
Luckily, horses have a buffet or should have a buffet of forage greenery in front of them most of the day. So
I like to say that my horse Brody would eat brownies, drink whiskey, and smoke cigars if he could. That would be his life.
Aw.
Okay. So speaking of easy keepers, I think we kind of covered that. Are there certain types of forage that are better for easy keepers? What about hard keepers? Maybe we can touch on that real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So in general, I don't recommend 100% alfalfa forage for any horse. Again, in general, there are some cases where it would work very well. But for harder keepers, lactating, mares, that type of thing, I do like to include a little bit of alfalfa in their diets because alfalfa is low in carbohydrates, high in protein, and generally quite high in calories as well. So for those types of horses, having some higher calorie forage like alfalfa, like peanut hays, things like that can be a really good addition. I do like to mix those things though with grass hays because it helps to balance the calcium to phosphorus ratio, which makes it a little safer. Calcium phosphorus ratio is not as important for mature horses who are done with their developmental growth. But having that appropriate calcium to phosphorus ratio for young growing horses is really important. We don't want the phosphorus or the calcium to be too high. We want the calcium to be at least 2 or 3 times higher than the phosphorus for young growing horses.
What happens
that is something
if that gets out of balance?
It can cause developmental issues with their bone growth is basically what happens. So that's why we want to be really careful about pregnant gestating mares, lactating mares, young horses. We really want to make sure that their ratios are correct.
But we still want to look for balance, even though the horses are mature and perhaps bone growth isn't front and center in our concerns right now. We don't want to overdo it. Balance.
We don't want to overdo it.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely.
When I was up north, I was feeding mostly grass hay, and would reserve alfalfa for an ulcer-prone mare or right before exercise, something to just kind of create a nice happy tummy before we go to work. And I noticed that down here in the South, it's everywhere. It's hugely popular. Of course, we have a lot more options here. But I asked a friend, I said, why is alfalfa hay or alfalfa blends, why is it so popular? She said, you get a lot of bang for your buck with alfalfa. It goes a long way. Can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, so alfalfa is higher in calorie generally than most grass hays. It's higher in protein than most grass hays. And it does provide that good gastric buffering because alfalfa is higher in calcium than phosphorus generally. So helps for horses that may be prone to ulcers. Eating a little bit of that before a ride can help provide that mat so you don't get that gastric slushing up into their esophagus, causing those glandular ulcers and that type of thing. So yeah, for all of those reasons, it's just, if you have a horse that needs some calories, having some alfalfa mixed in can be great. Also, if you have a horse that is metabolic, but not overweight, it can still be good to include some alfalfa because that can bring down the overall NSC of your forages. Generally speaking, alfalfa runs right around 10% non-structural carbohydrate. And sometimes grass hays are much higher than that. We're looking like 17% NSC sometimes, depending on the cutting.
Right.
As long as if you have a metabolic horse that is not obese, you can incorporate some alfalfa to help bring down the total NSC of the diet.
Interesting. Oh my God, I want to go out there and start changing my diet. No, actually my horses are good. They're good because for a number of reasons, not the least of which is I am a customer and huge fan of Triple Crown products. And so I read your resources. You have such good content available, self-help, Q&A. It's just coming from a software background where I focused on user interface, UI, UX for customers, basically the customer process, that life cycle. You guys get it. You really help the customer understand what they're getting, how to make decisions. So I feel empowered with all that information. But now having you here for this segment, I mean, this is great. My gosh, this goes fast, and I want to ask 100 million more questions. But lastly, since we're talking mostly about forage, how can we combine a fortified feed? Let's say we need to do it, or we're not sure that we need to do it. How would we know that it's time to incorporate a fortified feed or a complete feed?
If you cannot get enough quality hay that your horse is effectively eating. So despite customers' best efforts, I'll have customers call and say, I found this beautiful hay and I had it tested and it tests out wonderful. And I put it in front of Hank and he says, no way, mom. Right?
All the time.
All the time. So forage first. But if for some reason, like Hank, your horse is not consuming enough of the forage, maybe it's that their teeth are getting a little worn. So even though you've had dentals, whereas like 15 years ago, that horse could eat 2 pounds of hay an hour because his teeth were perfect. Now they're a little smoother and he's only getting in maybe a half a pound of hay an hour, that type of thing. Those things make huge differences. So just because your horse can eat hay doesn't mean that he can eat enough quickly enough to maintain the body weight that they had been previously. So I encourage people, especially in the wintertime, and I know we're all really busy, but take that blanket off or get your hands up under the blanket, please. Don't pull it off in the first warm day in late February and have the shock of having a thin horse. So make sure you're at least reaching up under that blanket, feeling the ribs, feeling the top line, taking the blankets off a couple of times, and keeping a good eye on that. And so if you're noticing a little bit of weight loss and your horse has just been eating forages, it's okay to stay on a balancer and feed 2 or 3 pounds of a higher calorie feed. And then if your horse is still not kind of keeping up with the nutrition that it needs, the calories that it needs, then you just go higher and you can move into complete feeds like our senior feeds, where if for some reason your horse just could not eat hay, you could feed complete feeds at 15, even 20 pounds a day. Now, we never recommend feeding more than about 5 pounds for a 1,000-pound horse at each meal. So you might be feeding 4 meals a day. But yeah, so if you're progressing to that level where you just can't get enough calories into your horse from forages for whatever reason, adding complete feeds are great. Or if you don't need complete feeds, you can mix a higher calorie feed with a balancer, or you could just feed a high calorie feed at its recommended level. For instance, some of our feeds, like the low starch, 6 pounds a day for a 1,000-pound horse is what that requires. And if that's the calories your horse needs, then that's a perfect fit. And we're happy at Triple Crown. If you feel like you're having trouble tweaking it down to make sure they're getting the right vitamins and minerals plus the right calories, we are more than happy to help.
So we don't have to guess. I mean, we can get this down to an almost exact science when we're feeding. Like we can know exactly how much our horses are getting by measuring that fortified feed.
Yes, exactly.
I feed a little less than that, but I have 2 off-track mares that came real skinny. And, the other thing is I like to have a fortified feed because it's soaked, and I soak it with a little beet pulp and then an alfalfa blend pellet. It's, I call it cooking for my horses, but it does a couple things. It ensures that they have something to look forward to. It's great for training. It, because it's so soakable and delicious, it's just a little extra hydration that the horses
wonderful
get.
In the wintertime. Yes.
Right? And you can tweak it. You can add a little more of this and take a little bit of that away. I like the flexibility of adding that to my horse's diet. Well, we're going to have to wrap this particular segment. So before I let you go, tell our listeners where they can find out more about Triple Crown feeds, and if they need to check in with you with a question or two, how they can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So find us at triplecrownfeed.com. We also have Facebook, TikTok, or you can call us 800-451-9916, and you'll probably get me on the other end.
Stacy Anderson, thank you so very much for the beginning of something beautiful. I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I hope you found that informative. Be sure to subscribe to the Stall and Stable Show on your favorite podcast player, because we're going to have Triple Crown, Stacy and her colleagues and some other experts on a regular basis on this Triple Crown Nutrition series to talk about how we can keep our horses healthy through nutrition, what's happening in nutrition, what's fact, what's myth, what we're discovering now in research. So be sure to subscribe to the Stall and Stable Show so you don't miss any of this good stuff. I encourage you to contact Stacy if you have questions about your horse's diet or any questions about Triple Crown Feed. Again, you can reach them at triplecrownfeed.com. or go to stallandstable.com/support. If you have questions about running your barn, making it more efficient, setting it up, buying a horse property, or if you're running a business related to horses, please feel free to go to stallandstable.com and book an appointment with me. If you're unsure about how I can help you, send me an email. You can reach me at helena@stallandstable.com. You can tell me what your issue is, and then I'll let you know if I can help you. From there, if you decide you want to book an appointment, it's really easy to do so. And that's going to be a wrap for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it.